So in this section of the lab, you guys are defining a problem. You're telling me whether these scenarios can be answered by science or not. And you're going to use the following criteria in order to determine if it can be answered by science or not. Because just because a question can be answered does not necessarily mean it can be answered scientifically. It belongs in another discipline. It doesn't belong in science. That's just what science is. So first criteria is that must be able to use evidence from observations. From observations and investigations. So you must be able to acquire that evidence and be able to observe something. If you're not able to observe something, you have a question but you can't observe it, then it doesn't belong in science. The next criteria that I want you guys to use is that evidence, is that data that you're observing, that you're analyzing, is it scientifically, is your problem scientifically measurable? Measurable, okay. So are you able to properly run a test? Are you able to properly analyze that problem? It must be able to be measurable. And then we'll get on to more criteria later on when we talk about forming a hypothesis. Okay, so I'm actually going to do an example with you. I believe this is the fourth problem that you guys have in this section. We are wondering what is the best recipe for chocolate chip cookies. Okay, we are going to define whether or not we can answer this question through science, through specifically scientific inquiry. So if it can be answered by science, you will say yes, that it can, and you don't need to go further from there. If it cannot be answered by science, you will say no, and you will go on to explain why. Okay, so our problem, what is the best recipe for chocolate chip cookies? What do you guys think? I'll give you a minute. Can this be answered by science? Can we gather evidence from observations? Can we scientifically measure this? So this cannot be answered by scientific inquiry. I'm going to say no. This cannot be answered by scientific inquiry. Why? Why can it not? Well, I'm wanting to know what the best recipe is for chocolate chip cookies. What does that mean? Are you talking about, so what is the best? The best mean? What is the best? Are you talking about the amount of time that it takes to make those chocolate chip cookies? So minimal amount of time is the best recipe because it's more efficient in making that treat. Are you talking about cost? Are you talking about the least amount of money is going to give you the best recipe? I don't know. I don't know what you mean by that. Are you talking about, big one here, maybe you guys can think of the next factor, taste. We all have different preferences. Pretty cool that we all have different preferences. Otherwise, options out there for edible treats would be quite limited if we all thought the best chocolate chip cookie existed. We all have different tastes. The best recipe is, it sounds like, it's based on opinion. And when something's based on opinion, you cannot answer it by science. It's not scientifically measurable. This would not be able to be answered by a scientific inquiry. I want you to do a similar analysis to all the other problems in that set. Before I go on to another section, I do want to point out that in your lab, you have some questions, some sneaky questions that are bolded in paragraphs. I don't want you to skip those. Make sure you read through the entire lab, because sometimes I just give you one question in that section. It's not multiple questions like you see in defining a problem. Make sure not to skip those and to answer those questions accordingly. I believe one's in replication section and one is in the standardized variable section. Don't skip those. Make sure to answer those questions. They're bolded, and it's just one question in those sections.